The morning it started, the sky looked like wet concrete and the coffee tasted like burnt resentment. Elizabeth didn't notice at first. She'd been running on habit for years. Same cafe. Same seat. Same $5 tip for Joe, the old waiter whose hands shook like he'd lived 100 lives already. He gave her his usual soft nod. She returned it without thinking. Then she walked into the company building, and the air felt wrong. Not suspicious. Not alarming. Just wrong in the quiet way migraines start. Like something had shifted an inch to the left when no one was looking. She rode the elevator up to R&D like always, replaying the patent renewal email from last night. There was nothing unusual about the document at first glance. Same formatting. Same legal tone. But when she checked the names attached to the renewal, the inventors, hers was missing. Not forgotten. Not misplaced. Removed. She depinged legal politely. Got a corporate smoothed reply 3 hours later. We followed the current team structure. Current team structure. As if she hadn't architected half the systems they bragged about in every investor meeting. She walked past cubicles that felt unfamiliar, too quiet, like everyone was holding a breath they didn't want her to hear. Then she reached her desk. Except it wasn't her desk anymore. Her family photo was gone. Her notebook was gone. Even her stupid, stress-busting rubber cube was gone. In its place, a stranger's folders, a half-empty Starbucks cup, and silence thick enough to choke on. Elizabeth blinked once, and that's when she heard a voice behind her. Don't go in today. She turned slowly. Joe, the same old waiter from the cafe, was standing inside the office doorway, wearing his poncho, dripping rainwater onto the carpet. He never stepped inside the building before. Never followed her here. Never looked this terrified. He grabbed her wrist gently. Elizabeth, he whispered. You do not want to be here today. She stared at him, confused, unsettled. Joe, what are you talking about? No explanation, he said. No time, trust me. She did the strangest thing she'd done in 7 years of corporate loyalty. She listened, turned around, walked out, got back into her car, and sat there as rain hammered the windshield, staring at the office she'd given her life to. At 8:16, the building lights flickered on. At 8:17, her junior teammate Jennifer pulled into the lot, smiling, holding a laptop she didn't normally carry. At 8:18, Daniel, the intern-turned-analyst she once mentored, walked inside, adjusting his blazer like he was rehearsing confidence. At 8:19, Bryce arrived. Her closest colleague. The man she'd covered for 3 Thanksgivings in a row. He walked straight into her office. Not hesitating. Not wondering where she was. Like he already knew. Like they all did. 3 minutes later, HR followed with 3 black folders. Termination folders. Elizabeth's stomach dropped. Her badge hadn't pinged once. Her name hadn't been checked in. The blinds to her office quietly slid shut. She hadn't been late. She had been removed. Erased. And they thought she wouldn't notice. She exhaled slowly. They're using my work, she whispered. They're erasing me to profit from the IPO. But they didn't know the truth. She still had the one thing they needed most. The patents weren't theirs yet. Not legally. And what Elizabeth was about to do next would turn their entire IPO into a funeral. She didn't drive home right away. She drove 3 blocks down, parked behind a bakery that smelled like burning sugar and deadlines, and just sat there. Hands on the steering wheel. Heart pounding in the hollow place under her ribs. She wasn't shocked. Not really. The signs had been there. The skipped meetings. The vague HR emails. The sudden realignment chatter. The way the CTO stopped looking her in the eye. But watching them walk into her office while pretending she didn't exist. That was new. She finally exhaled and opened her laptop. Not her company one. The old personal machine she kept around for nights exactly like this. She logged into her private email, her fingers steady in a way her breath was. And she pulled up the draft IPO deck she'd forwarded herself weeks ago. Back then, she hadn't understood why she felt the need to keep a copy. Now she did. Slide after slide. Her system diagrams. Her architecture. Her innovation. Her years of unpaid overtime and miracle patchwork. All repackaged under the same phrase. Company-owned IP. Not hers. Not attributed. Just theirs. She clicked into the background details she knew no one else checked. The version history wasn't kind. Her work had been stripped, reassigned, polished over by people who hadn't even been in the original lab. Bryce's edits. Jennifer's revisions. Daniel's final approval. Not a single trace of her name. Not one. Her jaw tightened. She opened another folder. A quiet archive of drafts, diagrams, early sketch. He's and timestamped prototypes she'd created years ago. All hers. All original. All legally defensible. And all being used in a billion-dollar IPO pitch without her consent. Her pulse steadied. She wasn't helpless. They forgot one thing. The company didn't own her patents unless she let them. And she hadn't. She leaned back in the driver's seat, listening to the rain threatening to break into a full storm. It wasn't regret she felt. It was clarity. There were 3 moves she could make. Fix it quietly. Walk away quietly. Or burn the whole thing down with surgical precision. She wasn't a quiet person anymore. She pulled out her phone, opened the one contact she never deleted, and hit call. A woman picked up on the second ring. Liz, it's early, you okay? Elizabeth stared out the windshield at the building that had just tried to erase her. Emily, she said calmly. I need to transfer 6 patents to a new entity, today. Emily inhaled sharply. Oh. So they finally did it. Yes, Elizabeth said. And I'm done playing defense. What's the name of the holding company? Emily asked. Elizabeth looked at the wet street. A slow smile curled at the edge of her lips. It doesn't exist yet, she said. But it will in the next hour. Emily's tone shifted into something sharp. Focused. Predatory. Send me your documents, we're moving now. Elizabeth closed her laptop, slid it back into her bag, and started the car. They erased me, she whispered. Now I'll erase their IPO. She checked her mirror once more. No one was behind her. Good. They had no idea she was already 3 steps ahead. Rima sat in her living room with the curtains half closed, letting only a sliver of late-morning sunlight creep across the floor. Her coffee had gone cold. Her hands hadn't stopped shaking. Not from fear. From recognition. She'd seen this play before, twice in her career. But never this cleanly executed. Never this rehearsed. She opened her laptop again, the older one. No synced drives, no trackers, no remote wipes. The kind that corporate couldn't silently brick if they got nervous. Her inbox had already changed. The older emails she'd forwarded to herself were still there, untouched, but something new sat at the top. A message from a name she hadn't seen in years. Rima, call me. Now. It was from Alex, her former director, the only person who had ever told her she was irreplaceable and meant it. She didn't call. Not yet. Instead, she pulled up the second file she'd flagged last night, the one that had started all this nausea. The internal product roadmap. She scrolled. And there it was again. Her architecture. Her diagrams. Her entire modular design philosophy. All stripped of her name. All reassigned to the exact 3 people she saw walk into the building that morning. Jennifer, presenter. Daniel, implementation lead. Bryce, strategic owner. Rima stared at the screen until her vision blurred. 7 years of late nights. 7 years of unpaid overtime disguised as passion. 7 years of being the person everyone quietly DM'd whenever the system caught fire. And now they had carved her out of the blueprint like she was a typo. She leaned back into the couch, inhaling through her nose. Okay, she whispered. Let's see how deep this goes. Her fingers moved automatically. She dug through Slack exports, her backups not theirs. Tiny things she had shrugged off suddenly made sense. The CTO asking for final prototypes, just for consolidation. Jennifer shadowing her for 6 months under the guise of cross-discipline exposure. Bryce asking for her entire API spec as a reference for documentation. They hadn't been learning. They'd been copying. Replacing. Preparing the moment she stopped being convenient. Her chest tightened. She swallowed a wave of nausea. And then another puzzle piece clicked into place. The metadata on the new architecture file she found last night wasn't edited by the 3 she saw walk in. It was edited by someone else. Someone higher. The CTO. The man who told her last quarter, "We just need you to stay flexible while we restructure." Flexible. Right. They didn't restructure. They amputated. She stood from the couch, paced once across the carpet, and forced herself to breathe. Her phone buzzed again. A new email. Different tone this time. "Hi, Rima. We noticed you weren't online this morning. Are you feeling well? Please let us know." She almost laughed. Concern. Now. No. This wasn't concern. This was confirmation. They were checking whether the execution had gone unnoticed. Rima closed the email. Then she closed her eyes. And for the first time since dawn, the panic burned away. Replaced by something colder. Sharper. She wasn't erased. Not yet. They only thought she was. And that mistake, their mistake, was the only advantage she had left. She opened her laptop again. Her voice came out low, steady, unrecognizable even to her own ears. "All right," she said. "If they're goin' to pretend I don't exist, then I'll show them what a ghost can do." The cursor blinked. Her pulse steadied. Rima didn't remember leaving her living room. One moment she was staring at the laptop screen, pulse hammering. And the next she was standing in her small home office, yanking open the drawer where she kept things she hoped she'd never need. Old backups. Old server keys. Old dev notes. And one dusty hard drive, labeled the same way she labeled everything important. If they ever try it. She plugged it in. A soft hum. A blue light. Then the folders appeared, her personal insurance policy. 7 years of early prototypes. 7 years of architecture drafts. 7 years of proof that most of the company's core innovations had come from her brain, her hands, her nights sacrificed at the altar of deadlines. She clicked open the first directory. There it was. The exact system the company was about to parade in front of investors next week. She had saved everything. Timestamps. Iteration logs. Debug screenshots. The handwritten whiteboard photos that showed the original structure. With her name on all of it. Her mouth twitched. Funny how they forgot that the person who builds the machine usually keeps their own blueprint. She dug deeper, pulling up the internal emails she'd exported months ago. Conversations where executives called her critical. Irreplaceable. The backbone of this launch. The same people who pretended she never existed. She kept scrolling. Every file she opened made the picture sharper. They had tried to erase her. But she had kept receipts. All of them. Around noon, her phone vibrated on the desk. A message. Not from HR this time. From her former director, Alex. "Call me. This is bigger than you think." She stared at the screen. Bigger than being erased from her own work. Bigger than them marching into her office with pre-written replacements. She didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, she opened the last folder on the drive. The one she hoped she'd never touch. Her contingency plan. The patent she'd drafted herself. Her original, unfiltered design. Stronger than the company's version. Cleaner. More scalable. And most importantly, still in her name legally. Untouched. Unclaimed. Unfiled. They de-stolen the diluted version. The real blueprint was still hers. She leaned back in her chair, breath slow, eyes cold. There it was. The piece they didn't know existed. The card they couldn't erase because they didn't even know she held it. She understood now what Joe meant when he told her not to go inside. Someone had warned him. Someone inside the company who still valued her enough to try. But who? And why now? Before she could tumble further into that thought, her laptop pinged again. A new email, internal distribution. Public channel. She clicked it open. There they were. The team. Her team. Smiling in a photo with the CTO. Standing in front of a whiteboard filled with her system diagrams. Cropped to remove her name. The caption. Proud of the innovation this team built together. Together. She stared at the photo. Her jaw clenched. Her pulse steadied. Everything inside her went still. Not angry. Not hurt. Just sure. This wasn't going to be solved with an email. Or a meeting. Or a complaint. This was going to take precision. Strategy. Patience. Rima closed the email. Closed her laptop. And whispered to the empty room. Fine. If you want a war, I'll give you one. She stood. Rima didn't strike immediately. People who panic make noise. People who win move quietly. She sat at her dining table with a legal pad, the same cheap yellow kind she used during early prototyping days, and began drawing boxes, arrows, timelines, mapping every thread of betrayal until the web was clear. She circled 3 names. Bryce. Jennifer. Daniel. The trio who walked into her office with HR yesterday like a replacement cast, entering a show where the lead actor had already been written out. She underlined each name twice. None of them were smart enough to orchestrate this. They were pawns, ambitious, insecure, eager to be noticed. Someone higher had moved them. Her pen tapped the table. There were only 3 people with the authority, access, and motive to erase her. The CTO. The VP of Engineering. And the COO. She circled all 3. But her gut pointed to one. The CTO. Mark Whitfield. He loved using words like vision, future-facing, and innovation culture. But the only thing he ever actually built was an ego large enough to require its own badge access. He'd resented Rima for years, not openly, of course. He was too polished for that. Too PR trained. But he knew the truth. Rima's work made him look good. Too good. If investors ever found out who the real architect was, he'd lose half the spotlight he used to justify his salary. So he cut her out. Cleanly. Quietly. He underestimated her. At 11:03 a.m., her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Dawn. Let them get ahead of you. The filing isn't final yet. Rima stared at it. Her stomach tightened. Someone inside was watching. Someone who knew exactly what was happening and what she was doing in response. But who would risk texting her? Who even knew her private number? She typed back. Who is this? Delivered. Read. No reply. She exhaled slowly. Fine. If they wanted to stay a ghost, she could work with that. She grabbed her laptop again, flipped it open, and opened the secure server logs she'd backed up over the years, because unlike her executives, she understood redundancy. Most people forgot this. If you build the foundation of a company, you can also see the cracks before anyone else notices. And there was one crack they didn't expect her to find. A shadow repository. A private code branch created by someone on the exec network. Hidden. Restricted. But not from her. She typed in an override. The kind of override only someone who originally architected the system would know. The directory opened. Her blood turned to ice. They weren't just erasing her from patents. They were replacing her entire system. Everything she'd designed. The infrastructure. The modular AI logic. The predictive load handling. Rewritten, reorganized, rebranded. Like she never existed. Like she never built the backbone they were now hollowing out to install a shiny, unstable, PR-friendly shell in time for the IPO. She scrolled. Line after line of poorly written shortcuts. Memory leak disasters waiting to happen. Dangerous architecture choices that could crash at scale. They weren't just thieves. They were idiots. She took screenshots, dozens, time-stamped metadata preserved. Evidence of sabotage. Evidence of incompetence. Evidence Rima could weaponize. Then her phone buzzed again. Her heart stuttered. A single message. They're presenting your system to the investors tomorrow. No name. No signature. Just the warning. Her pulse steadied into something cold and razor-sharp. Tomorrow. So that was it. They had cut her out today. So they could steal her legacy tomorrow. Rima closed her laptop. Everything inside her went silent. Not numb. Not overwhelmed. Focused. She walked to her bedroom, opened the closet, and reached for a box she hadn't touched in years. Inside was her original prototype binder. The one she'd kept physically. Off-network. Off-grid. In her own handwriting. Every page had her name on it. Every diagram was the real version. The version investors would kill to see. The version her company thought they owned but didn't. She placed the binder on the table next to the hard drive and whispered to the quiet room. Tomorrow, you want to present my work. She smirked. Let's see how it goes when I present mine first. She grabbed her coat. Rima walked into the chilled evening air with that binder tucked under her arm, not like a folder, not like paperwork, but like a weapon. Because that's exactly what it was. Her neighborhood was quiet, the kind of silence that makes your thoughts louder. Street lamps buzzed overhead. A dog barked 2 houses down. Some teenager sped off on a bike with a squeaky chain. Normal life. Meanwhile, her entire career was being dissected and stolen in a glass building downtown. She unlocked her car and slid inside. For a full minute, she didn't start the engine. She just sat there, staring at the dashboard, breathing evenly, calm enough to think, angry enough to burn quietly from the inside out. Her mind replayed the timeline, every detail perfectly sequenced. 10:47 p.m. Legal filings overwrit. 7:12 a.m. Coworkers arrived to take her office. 8:03 a.m. HR folders spotted. 9:14 a.m. Exit interview request from HR. 11:03 a.m. The anonymous warning. Everything lined up. Calculated. Planned. Executed perfectly, except for one flaw. They didn't expect Rima to vanish. They expected her to walk in, sit, cry, sign something, sign away everything. But she walked out. She watched from afar. She kept access they forgot to revoke. They erased her physically. Digitally. They never stood a chance. She started the engine, her hands steady on the wheel. First stop wasn't the office. It wasn't legal counsel. It wasn't HR. It was a small glass building 3 blocks away, the firm where her old mentor, Raj Malhotra, still consulted twice a week. He used to say something that stuck with her. They will always underestimate the person who builds instead of brags. Tonight, that truth felt sharper than ever. She parked, walked toward the entrance, scanned the empty lobby, and buzzed his office. The intercom crackled. Hello. It's Rima. A pause. Then, come up. She took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Raj opened the door before she knocked. He looked older, gray streaks at his temples, crow's feet deeper. But his expression was the same mix of intelligence and quiet annoyance with the entire tech world. You look like someone who needs whiskey, he said. I need something stronger, SH. E murmured. She stepped inside. The office smelled like jasmine tea and old carpet. Bookshelves overflowed. Whiteboards covered in equations. A chessboard sat on the table, mid-game. She placed the binder down with a heavy thud. Raj stared at it. Is that everything they're trying to steal? She finished. He exhaled slowly, then motioned to the chair. "Tell me." So she did. She walked him through the deleted credits, the patent metadata, the shadow repository, the erasure attempts. She didn't rant. She told it like code, cleanly, logically, step by step. When she finished, Raj rubbed his eyes. "They're presenting tomorrow." "Yes." "And they think you're out." "Yes." "And you already transferred the core IP." "Yes." His lips parted in a slow, impressed smirk. "You always were 10 steps ahead." She leaned forward. "I need to be 20. Raj folded his hands. "What's your move?" She opened the binder. Turned to a page of diagrams. Real diagrams. The original architecture. The version the investors would expect to see when the CTO spoke tomorrow. But her company's version. It wasn't just wrong, it was dangerous. Raj scanned it. "They're going to present the unstable prototype." "Worse," she said. "They're going to pitch it as production ready." Raj stared at her. "That's fraud." "I know." "That's felony fraud." "I know." "And if you expose it, they lose everything," she finished. Raj sat back. "And you." She closed the binder. "I get my work back. On my terms. With a contract that recognizes what I built, and a company that actually deserves it." Raj studied her a moment, then asked the question no one else would have thought to ask. "Are you doing this for revenge?" Rima shook her head. "No. I'm doing this so they never do it to the next person." Raj stood, walked to a drawer, pulled out a sealed white envelope, and handed it to her. "What's this?" "Plan B," he said simply. "In case Plan A gets messy." She didn't open it. She didn't need to. She slipped it into her bag. Raj nodded toward the door. "Go. You've got one night to save a story they tried to erase." Rima left his office, binder under her arm, plan forming piece by piece. Tomorrow morning, the executives would step onto the IPO stage, holding stolen work. And she'd be standing there too. But not as the erased engineer. Not as the disposable R&D cog. As the storm they never prepared for. She started her car. Tomorrow was war. Rima sat at the red light 2 blocks from her apartment, engine humming beneath her fingertips, rain misting across her windshield. Her pulse was steady, her breathing even. But her mind, a rapid-fire processor running 20 threads at once. She replayed the diagrams, the metadata, the erased credits, the stage takeover, the IPO schedule. It all pointed to one thing. They were about to unveil a lie. A multi-million-dollar, investor-baiting, career-ending lie. Built on technology they didn't actually control. A lie she could dismantle with one click. The light turned green. But she didn't drive home. Instead, she turned left. Toward the one place she swore she'd never step foot again after the betrayal. The office. Tonight. Alone. Unannounced. No badge swipe. No HR escort. No dramatic confrontation. She had no intention of being seen. Only of seeing. She parked her car 2 blocks away. Pulled her hood up. Walked through the rain like a ghost, slipping between shadows. The lobby was empty, just a tired security guard watching soccer highlights on his phone. Rima smiled faintly. He never looked up as she walked past. Of course he didn't. Nobody ever really saw her. Until they absolutely needed her. She reached the elevators and pressed the button. Her reflection in the metal doors surprised her. Not scared. Not shaken. Focused. Sharp. Exactly who she needed to be. The elevator doors opened. The 4th floor hallway was dark, except for the emergency lights glowing blue against the walls. Every cubicle deserted. Every screen black. But the air. She could feel it. The tension. The wrongness. She walked toward her old office. Halfway down the hall, she froze. Because there it was. Voices. Low. Muffled. Panicked. coming from the conference room at the end of the corridor. She stepped quietly toward the doorway, stopped just before the glass. Listened. We need to finalize the deck, Bryce was saying, voice strained. If she shows up tomorrow and claims attribution. She won't, Jennifer interrupted. She didn't even show up today. Joe said she freaked out and left. Daniel chimed in. She's passive, she won't fight, she never does. Rima's jaw tightened. Passive. Never fight. That's what they really believed. What years of quiet competence bought her? Their comfortable delusion that she'd roll over and accept the erasure. Bryce exhaled loudly. Doesn't matter. Legal said the R&D attributions are locked in. We control the filing rights now. Jennifer snickered. She'll probably send one sad email asking. What happened? We'll ignore it. Daniel added softly. She trusted us. A pause. Then laughter. They laughed. At her. At the years she spent fixing their failures. Saving their deadlines. Covering their mistakes. Her fingers curled into fists. But she stayed silent. Listening. Because that's how you win. Not by screaming. By knowing every piece of their hand before you play yours. Bryce finally spoke again. Okay, let's run the script. Investors arrive at 9:00 a.m. sharp. Rima moved away before she heard the rest. She didn't need to. She had enough. She walked deeper into the dark hallway. Right toward the restricted R&D server room. The one place she could access without her badge. Because she built the emergency override. They never revoked what they didn't know existed. She reached the panel, removed the small cover, and typed in the 10-digit master code she designed years ago during the prototype phase. The lock clicked open. She slipped inside. The room was cold, humming with dormant power. Rows of hardware towers blinked faint amber warnings. Diagnostics. Integrity checks. Sync exceptions. She approached the main console. Typed in a second code. The screens lit up in green. There it was. The real tech. The real architecture. Her architecture. Still intact. Still exactly as she'd built it. Before they rewrote her out of the entire narrative. She plugged in her encrypted drive. Pulled up the version history. The cross-chain timestamps. The back-end logs. Everything she needed to legally prove authorship. Every contribution. Every edit. Every line she wrote. All preserved. All time-stamped. All irrefutable. She wasn't just reclaiming her credit. She was building the case that would bury them professionally if they pushed this too far. She downloaded the final packet to her drive. Ejected it. Powered down the console. Then she turned to leave. But paused at the doorway. Not because she heard anything. Because she felt something shift. A decision crystallizing. Until now, her plan was quiet. Strategic. Surgical. But after hearing them mock her. After witnessing how confidently they prepared to profit off her work. A new resolve formed. A colder one. She wasn't just going to reclaim what was hers. She was going to walk onto that stage tomorrow. With something they didn't plan for. Not anger. Not chaos. Not revenge. Proof. Authority. And a move so clean they'd never recover. She stepped into the hallway. Tomorrow, the IPO would begin at 9:00 a.m. Tomorrow, the executives would proudly unveil the stolen innovation. Tomorrow, they'd learn who they tried to erase. The boardroom door clicked shut behind Rima, sealing in a silence that felt electric. Every executive sat stiffly in their leather chairs, eyes glued to her like she was a storm they'd underestimated. She placed the small encrypted drive on the table. No theatrics. No smile. Just a quiet, devastating calm. You have a problem, she said softly. And it's not me. It's the fact that you planned an IPO using technology you don't legally own. A tremor ran through the room. The CTO opened his mouth, but she lifted a hand barely, and he froze. I've reassigned the patents, she continued. All of them, Every cluster tied to your modular AI system, they belong to a private holding entity now, not you. One of the board members whispered something that sounded dangerously close to a prayer. Another stood up, pacing, sweating so hard his shirt stuck to his back. "You can't do this," he hissed. Rima tilted her head. "I already did." The CEO leaned forward, face pale. "Rima, listen, investors are already previewing the deck. We cannot move the IPO date, if this leaks." "No," she said, "not if, when." The temperature in the room dropped. Because that was when the projector flickered on. Not by the CTO. Not by the CEO. By Rima. A new presentation loaded onto the giant display, the screen washing the room in cold blue light. Vertex Innovations, internal clearance. Strategic IP acquisition, lead architect. Her name appeared underneath. Large. Bold. Unavoidable. The executives recoiled like they'd been slapped. "You gave them our technology," the CFO choked. "No," Rima said calmly. "I gave them mine." A beat of silence. Then the doors of the boardroom opened, and half a dozen screens lit up simultaneously as global tech bloggers, market analysts, and news outlets began to broadcast breaking alerts. Rival company quietly acquires key AI architect. IPO in jeopardy as IP ownership questioned. Whistleblower moves tech rights to competitor. The board stared at the headlines in frozen horror as notifications began exploding across their phones. Rima stood perfectly still. "You erased me," she said quietly, "so I erased your future." The CEO slammed his hands on the table. "Rima, we can negotiate." "There's nothing to negotiate," she said. "Vertex owns exclusive licensing rights. Anyone attempting to use the architecture pays them, if you allow. NCH your IPO tomorrow. You'll trigger a legal war you can't afford." The room felt smaller now. Crushed by the weight of consequences. Crushed by her. Then the glass behind her reflected something, a movement in the hallway. Reporters. Camera crews. Security trying and failing to hold them back. The news was already spreading faster than the board could breathe. "Perfect." She walked to the door, placed her fingers on the handle, paused. "Good luck with the IPO," she said softly. "Tell Bryce he can keep my office chair. It won't matter when the building burns down." And she left. No looking back. No second thoughts. As she stepped into the lobby, flashes blind her, reporters shouting questions, microphones shoved forward, camera shutters clicking. But she wasn't overwhelmed. She looked like she'd been born for this moment. Joe, the old waiter, stood quietly against the wall, watching the chaos unfold. When she passed him, he whispered, "Told you not to go in that day." She smiled. "Yeah, you saved me." Then she pushed through the glass doors. Into daylight. Into freedom. Into a new life built on the ashes of the old one. Behind her, the building buzzed like a collapsing beehive. Executives panicked. Phones rang nonstop. Legal teams scrambled. Investors retreated. Shares plummeted. Rima didn't watch. She just walked toward the car waiting for her, Vertex's CEO inside, smiling like someone who just won a war without lifting a finger. She opened the door. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded once. The car pulled away, leaving the burning empire shrinking in the rearview mirror. Rima didn't need to say a word. She'd already written the ending. And every person who tried to erase her would spend the next decade reading it.